One clear, hot summer night when he was a boy, the great preacher Fred Craddock and his father were in the backyard looking up at the stars. His father said, "Son, how far can you think?" "I don't know, Dad. What do you mean?" "Well, just think as far as you can. Think up toward the stars." So Fred pushed his imagination as far as he could and said, I'm thinking as far as I can think." His father said, "Well, in your mind, drive down a stake out there now." "Have you done it?" "Yes, sir," Fred answered. And then his father asked, "Now what's on the other side of that stake?" Fred said, "Well, there's more sky." And his father said, "Then move your stake. Think farther on." This is how I imagine the Apostle Paul, or likely one of Paul's disciples writing this letter in his name, gathers the young, growing congregation of Ephesus around him to talk about the love of God. How far do you think it goes? I can imagine him asking. Put down a stake there. Got it? Now, what's beyond that? Think farther. More love? Yes, that's it. Now move your stake. Oh, that you could fully grasp what is the breadth, length, height, and depth of God's love, he prays. Do you think these verses were written as part of Paul's morning pages? That practice Reverend Laura invited us to take up at the beginning of this series. These two verses are two run-on sentences, a stream of consciousness, something the writer must get out. Who needs punctuation? Oh, that you could grasp this love of God, experience this love that surpasses all understanding. He is straining language itself past the breaking point, trying to adequately explain something that can't be grasped fully in human thoughts or language. And yet this does not stop him from trying. The love of God is vast beyond imagination, beyond even the most remote stakes put down in our understanding, and yet, at the same time, it is imminently near, closer even than we can fathom. Go ahead, put a stake there, and here, and over there, and among them, and among those you find unlovable, and at the boundaries, even if we don't admit them aloud, where we think that love might not reach. What's beyond that? Think farther. Put a stake there. We cannot be outside of God's love. Our black and white either-or thinking prefers neat categories of who's in and who's out. And yet when it comes to this topic this morning, they are wholly inadequate. Love is infinitely more than a character trait. It is the reality of our very existence, the sphere in which we, all of us, live and move and have our being. We're not always aware of it, to be sure, but that doesn't change this incredible truth that no matter who we are, no matter where we are on the journey, no matter if faith is strong or altogether gone or was never there in the first place, we are always in the realm of God's love. That we would be rooted and grounded there, Paul prays, because he knows this is the place, the rich soil in which we come to know and trust our own belovedness, the place from which our own love grows and takes shape. Last weekend at our event with tree people in the Angeles National Forest was quite special. While previous projects focused on clearing these invasive mustard plants and building berms to water plants already in the ground, this time we got to plant some trees. If you didn't know your associate pastor is a tree hugger, you do now. I could not wait to sling on a bag and throw seeds liberally all over those hills, much like Johnny Appleseed, I imagine. Turns out my vision was just a bit off. Instead, we'd be carefully planting just one oak tree or one yucca plant at a time, each plant requiring at least 20 minutes of care in very specific, predetermined locations. Each tree came in precisely packed dirt cylinders, the covers of which we'd eventually remove as we planted them. And I was surprised after removing the cover from the first oak I held how extensive the root system of this tiny branch already was, and how it instinctively wound itself around as much soil as it was given. This was a moment. I was studying this intensely when just then a staff person interrupted this moment of zen. That cover shouldn't be off yet, man. What are you doing? It's not even in the ground. It startled me so much, I dropped my tree. But even then, the soil held the roots intact, or was it the other way around? Trees cling to life wherever they are, or else they don't live. Their roots grow quickly and inhabit whatever soil they are in, even but a small cylinder's worth. But we are not trees. Sometimes the conditions around us are not life-giving. They might even be hostile to life. They do not invite us to put our roots within. Or when we do, because we must or have no other choice, we cannot grow and thrive. The soil itself is deprived of sunlight, of water, of what it needs in order to nurture and sustain life. And would you believe that today's message came to me as I sat there digging in the dirt last weekend, getting ready to plant my fourth tree. That morning we were asked not just to scatter seeds and wish them luck as we drove away a few hours later, but rather we were asked to carefully craft the conditions for a single life, not only to survive, but to grow and to thrive, to give that life the very best chance possible. I mean, from how we were asked to dig our holes at a precise level, to keeping that cylinder intact until it was in the ground, to protecting that plant from animals by carefully placing netted caging around it, to filling that cage evenly and gently with dirt, and then filling around the cage, making sure to pack it firmly but not too much, and then generously water in a very specific way before filling the rest of the hole, building a berm, and then generously watering again, this time spreading out the top of the cage, and finally properly planting a tree. At first, I admit to thinking that day, really? All this care and attention for this tiny plot of earth, for this singular tree, doesn't seem very efficient, pragmatic. How much more we could do the Johnny Appleseed way. But by the fourth tree, it had all changed for me. This 2-square-foot plot of earth was exactly where I was supposed to be and work that day. Exactly where I was rooted and grounded in that moment, to that piece of earth, in that place, helping one singular life to grow. What if we imagined God's love like that? Imagine with the Talmud that there is an angel over every blade of grass whispering, grow, grow. Can we imagine our own lives rooted in that kind of love, too? Imagine that our vocation of being co-creators with the Creator of all wasn't about doing it all the time, but working right where we've been planted. In a 2017 article, Sharon Salzberg wrote, "When I asked my workshop attendees to name what each values most, people commonly say things like fairness, honesty, generosity, honor, compassion, and love. I often feel they say them almost wistfully, as if they exist in their imagination or in some world to come. And yet the world we can most try to affect is the one immediately around us. Salzberg calls this our 3 feet of influence. She writes, few people are powerful enough, persuasive, persistent, consistent, and charismatic enough to change the world all at once. But everyone has the ability to affect the 3 feet around them by behaving more ethically, honestly, compassionately, and lovingly toward those they meet and share life. I mean, can we picture this? If we all acted from this space of love, the terrain that would be covered, your 3 feet combined with mine, combined with hers and theirs, with all of ours. Imagine if we thought about our community in that way, our congregation's 3 feet of influence. If each of us, for instance, could answer the question, who are our neighbors? Can we imagine it? Put a stake there. Got it? Now think further. Think beyond that. Perhaps the art of loving more begins here, right here, immediately around us. Was it Mother Teresa who famously said, if you want to change the world, first go home and love your family? Yes, the scope of the problems we face today is daunting, but the work of love is one we undertake together, always together. Your 3 feet and mine, remember? And the best news of all, we are rooted and grounded in God's love. A love that is a lot like songs. Do you remember how Pete Seeger described them? Sneaky things, songs are, always slipping across borders. I know a lot is weighing us down these days. There's some heaviness in the air. I even sense some hopelessness settling around us like a marine layer that settles over the Pacific. I know because I feel it too. But there is no time to despair. There is only time for love in these days. Only time for love. I wish I had a better answer, something more profound, more inspired, more specific with which to leave you. But I leave you, as Paul did his community, to God, hoping, praying each of us is strengthened inwardly for the courageous living of these days. That each of us, in our fumbling attempts to live lovingly, knows we are loved just as much in the failures as in the successes. That each of us finds our roots refreshed and nourished here with one another every week. And this morning, especially at this table, around which we'll soon gather to be fed again with bread and cup. That each of us might find some power within to imagine just how far our love might reach each day. That each of us might see all of us, all of the animals, all of creation through the lens of God's belovedness and beauty. That we all, being rooted and grounded in love, will be able to grasp fully the breadth and length and height and depth of Christ's love. And with all God's children, experience this love that surpasses all understanding, so we may be filled with all the fullness of God. To God, whose power now at work in us can do immeasurably more than we can ask or even imagine. Amen.